few of you guys. And for the rest of us, we are going to be in Exodus chapter 6 today. Exodus chapter 6. I read a sign here recently that said, "Women, if your husband says he's going to do something, he'll do it. There's no reason to remind him every 6 months about it." And that hit a little close to home, and so I felt a little bit of attack there. But I don't know if you've been in a part of that relationship. I'm certain that we all have been in some sort of relationship that somebody has made a promise, somebody has given us their word, and then they did not actually hold up to their side of the story. They did not hold up to the things that they said they were going to do. It's happened to all of us, and honestly, if we're honest, we're also part of that problem, right? Because every single one of us has said that we would do something, but yet we did not follow through here. But aren't you so glad that we serve a God who is faithful? We serve a God who is true to his word, that when he says he is going to do something, he will do it. There's no doubt about it here. And we serve a God that's faithful, but sometimes it's hard to believe that, isn't it? Sometimes when life gets difficult, when life gets hard, it becomes more and more difficult just to trust him, even in those worst days here. And that's where we actually find the story of Exodus, where we find ourselves this morning, in Exodus chapter 6 here. Last week we took the week off for Friend Day, and the week before, Devin did a great job at preaching to Exodus chapter 6. Let me just kind of remind you, we're now 8 weeks into the series on Exodus. Let me just remind you probably why Moses is starting to doubt, why Moses is having some sort of feeling inside as, God, are you actually going to be faithful? Are you going to be true to your word? See, because it would almost be like if one day you were walking your dog. You're walking your dog around your neighborhood, and then all of a sudden in the distance there, you see a bush that's on fire. And you say, "Come here, Fluffy." And you go and check out this bush, and as you get over to this bush, all of a sudden then a voice starts to talk to you. And you would be freaked out, as Moses was freaked out, right? And it's the bush says to take off your shoes. So you take off your shoes. You're like, this is kind of strange. But then the voice says, I am the Lord your God. And you would be like, okay, I don't know what I ate last night. This is not good here. But you start to talk, and God is speaking to you. And at that point, you say, man, how do I know if any of this is true? And he says, what's in your hand? And you say, it's a brand new iPhone 13. Why do you ask, God? And he says, throw it on the ground. And you say, I'm not going to throw this on the ground. It's a brand new iPhone 13. So you gently lay it on the ground, and it turns into a snake, and which makes sense for an Apple product. But like it turns into a snake, and then and then he's like, okay, pick it up. And so you reluctantly pick it back up, and turns back into your phone. And you're like, okay, this is weird things that are going on here, but this seems like it's God. And God says here, listen, your neighbor has a mortgage at the local bank, and it's an unfair mortgage. He's paying 20% interest rate. It's a ripoff. You need to go inside that bank and tell that bank owner to let his mortgage go. And you say, well, I can't speak good. And he's like, listen, you got Larry across the street, your brother, like go get him. He's in the trailer, like grab him, and he speaks very well. And so you go get Larry, you go into the bank, you sit down in front of the CEO, and you say, Mr. CEO, let my neighbor's mortgage go. And he looks at you and he laughs. And he says, not only am I not going to let him go, I'm going to foreclose on his house today. And then you have to go back to your neighbor and tell him, you don't have a home anymore. See, because that's actually pretty similar to what happened for Moses, right? God, he was just minding his own business one day. God called him out of nowhere, said, go into Egypt and tell Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world, to let my people go. So he goes and he obeys, and he's just trying to do exactly what the burning bush told him to do. God told him to do this, and he goes before Pharaoh, and he says, let my people go. And Pharaoh says, I don't have to listen to you. Not only am I not going to let him go, I'm going to make it 10 times harder. They're going to have to find all their resources. They're going to have to find all this. It is going to be intense and suffering for them. And Moses at that point is probably rightfully, understandably saying, like, God, why did you do this? And actually at the end of chapter 5, let me start there. Last couple verses of chapter 5, it says, then Moses turned to the Lord and said, O Lord, why have you done evil to this people? Why did you even send me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all. he comes back and says, God, why'd you even send me? You knew this was going to happen, God. You knew that this was just going to turn out worse for them. So why did you even send me? It's just been evil for them. Why did you do this? And he's starting to doubt. He's starting to say, what plan do you have right now? But then Moses hears the answer from the Lord. And starting in chapter 6 now, our passage, it says, but the Lord said to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a strong hand he will send them out. And with a strong hand he will drive them out of this land. So God comes back and he says, listen, I did all of this so that you would see it, Moses. So that my people would see. It really didn't have too much to do with Pharaoh. In fact, it was so that they will also see that God is moving, that they will also see that God is faithful. And so right now he comes and he says, listen, I am faithful with my strong arm. That was actually a term that Pharaoh would have used a lot. He would always be talking about his strong and mighty arm here. And I don't know if you can tell this by the shirt I'm wearing, but I'm super buff. And I don't know why you're laughing. Thanks a lot. Nobody calls me buff. Not even my wife calls me buff. It's a problem. No, there's 3 people in the world that think that I'm a strong man. They're my 3 little boys, right? They're the only ones that look at me and say, man, Daddy is strong. And I'm over here pumping iron. And I'm like, it's 5 pounds. But they're impressed at that moment. They're impressed by their daddy's strength here. And it's always kind of fun to do things that impress them with my mighty strength, right? And this, honestly, is what God is about ready to do. He's like, listen, I'm going to show off, not for them. I'm going to show off for my children. Now, he actually had the strength to do it, right? He could actually show off for the whole world. But he says, this is not even for them, it's for you guys. This is why I'm doing it here. And so God spoke in verse 2. God spoke to Moses and said, I am the Lord. I am the Lord. And honestly, we could just probably stop right there. God could have stopped right there. And it's like, hey, Moses, I'm God. We're done here, right? Like that's the ultimate for the parent that says, because I said so. Why do I have to do that? Because I said so. This is the ultimate because I said so. I am the Lord. I'm God. Which, by the way, if he's God, it means that you're not God. Right? By implication there, which is wonderful news for you and I because it means that it's not really up to us. It means that all the striving and the hardship that we face, that it's actually in God's hands, and we can put it in God's hands and leave it in God's hands. So that is wonderful news here. But I want us to notice a couple things right off the bat. Number 1, this is how he starts it. He starts it out by saying, I am the Lord. This is what he wanted them to know. And he's going to continue to repeat this. And then also even notice in the next few verses as we keep reading how often you're going to notice one word. It's the word I. Because God is going to keep saying, I am the Lord, and keep reminding him who he is and that he is trustworthy. And then he's also going to keep reminding him that he will be faithful to the promises. So just notice all of that. In verse 3, it says, I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself known to them. So he says, I appeared to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and these were people that Moses would esteem. These are the people that every Jewish man at that point wanted to be like. They were the patriarchs. They were the people that started it all. He looked up to them. He says, I appeared to them. But then it says, I appeared to them as God Almighty, which is the Hebrew word El Shaddai, God of glory, God of high. And so that was the name it says that he used for them. But then it goes on and says, but now I'm appearing to you as Yahweh. Lord, and all capital letters there. That's the word for Yahweh. And so he's saying, listen, they didn't know me by that name, my covenantal name that I'm giving you. They knew me as El Shaddai, my title, but you know my name. There's one problem with all that. It's not entirely true, it seems like. Because if you go back in the book of Genesis, you can actually find dozens of times where God refers to himself as Yahweh. And there's even times when all those men that are listed refer to God as Yahweh here. And so people have actually looked at this verse and say, well, there's a contradiction in the Bible. It can't be true because they actually did know his name, Yahweh. But I don't really think that he's saying that they didn't know the name. They didn't know that word, Yahweh, but rather that Moses was going to know God like they never got to know God. See, because you probably know me. If you've been coming here at all, then certainly you know my name, Joel, unless you Actually, my legal name is Matthew, but like if you've been coming here for very long, then you already knew that I go by my middle name, Joel. And you probably know if you've been here for a few weeks that I have 3 little boys, that I have a beautiful wife over there, even if you've been coming very long, you know a few of my favorite stories that I go back to, like whenever I took my wife on our very first date, it was to a cemetery, and it worked. I got her, all right, but in spite of the cemetery, not because of it. But like you've heard a few of those stories, right? But you only really know the stories that I want you to know. Like if we don't have a relationship, if you've just been coming here and we haven't got to sit down and talk very much, then you know the things that I have wanted to say up here, and you don't know too much about me. Other than that, you certainly probably don't know how many brothers and sisters I have or what their names are probably. You probably haven't been to my parents' back porch. If you have, that's a little worrisome. Like, there's certain things about it. You don't know that as a kid, I always introduced myself as Matthew Joel Hastings, big boy. I don't know why. It was like a complex I had. I don't know. But like, there's all sorts of things there that you are not going to know about me until you get to know me. There's things that Bethany, my wife, knows about me that you're never going to know about me because there's a relationship, there's a covenant there. And what God is saying is, listen, they might have known my name, but you're going to know me in a way that they never got to know me as. And that's encouragement for Moses here. And that should encourage us as well, because it says, it keeps going on. It says, I will establish my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan and the land in which they lived as sojourners. So it starts out saying, I will establish my covenant with them. Listen, I was reading in Genesis this week in my personal devotions, whenever God established his covenant with Abraham, Genesis 15, if you remember the story, he actually told Abraham to go and cut a cow in half, cut some goats in half, and then walk down the middle of it. And then that symbolized basically, as long as these animals are dead, then that's how long I will keep my covenant with you. See, because a covenant is different than a contract. A covenant says, even if the other side breaks their part of the deal, I'm still going to be faithful. And so whenever I do a marriage here, I always talk about a marriage covenant. I don't talk about a marriage contract, because I want them to know, and I want you to know, that even if your spouse doesn't hold up their end of the deal, that you're going to still be faithful even then. And I have been trying to get like new brides to do this as their covenantal sign instead of the unity candle. Like, forget unity candle, cut a cow in half, ladies, and like just walk through it. I will do that wedding for free. So many good sermon illustrations after that. But he's promising that, and he's saying, I will be true to this, that I will establish my covenant. I will give them land. But notice the very last word there is sojourners. It's saying that whenever Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, when they walked through there, that they weren't actually permanent residents. They were passing through. That they were just passing through this land here. And so they were never going to realize fully exactly what God had for them. God had something even better for Moses. God had something better for the Israelites who actually ended up walking into that promised land. That before they were just sojourners. They were just travelers. It was like whenever a Floridian snowbirder says that they're a Floridian. It's like, snowbirds aren't real Floridians, right? Let's be honest here. Like, you're not a real Floridian until you walk outside in like 1,000,000-degree heat in August, and like it's the surface of the sun, and the only reason you're going out is because you got to get bread because there's a hurricane coming, and you won't be able to get bread. Like, that's when you know you're a Floridian, right? And so he's saying, listen, they never got to experience the things that you're going to be able to experience, Moses. And this should encourage us. Verse 5, moreover, I have heard the groaning of the people of Israel from the Egyptians hold as slaves, and I have remembered my covenant. That word moreover is a good word when God is talking about his goodness, isn't it? It's on top of that, above and beyond that. And he says, moreover, I have heard the groaning. Whenever you say groaning in prayer, it's the reason why you're groaning is because you can't muster up enough strength to actually say the words. Earlier on in the book of Exodus, it says that they were crying out to God, but it seems like now they can't even cry out to God. All that they have within them is simply just a groan. They're just groaning and saying, God, we don't have it in us. Please be faithful. And the first point in your bulletin is this, is that God is faithful. God is faithful. Even when you're not faithful, he still is faithful. Even when life feels like it's falling apart, even when your marriage is falling apart, even when the kids run away, like all of these things that happen to us, and we say, God, what are you doing this? God is faithful. And if you don't hear anything else today, I want you to know this: no matter what is happening, God is faithful. He knows what you're going through, and he will be faithful to it. And so in verse 6 now, it says, say therefore to the people of Israel. This is God speaking to Moses. Say this to the people of Israel. I am the Lord. Do you notice? He started the same way. I am the Lord. I will bring you out under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm, with great acts of judgment. Notice, he's like, I am the Lord. I will do this. I will do this. I will do this. I will bring you out of slavery. I will redeem you. Redeem is a great word. It's for the slave, that somebody would come. If you're a slave, you can't actually free yourself, can you? There's no way for you to free yourself. It would only be if somebody stepped in and said, I will pay for that person and I will set them free. And it says that God is going to be the one that steps in and he redeems us. He's the one that's going to pay the price. And just like he did for the Egyptians, he's paid the price for you and I on the cross. He stepped in and he redeemed us. Verse 7 now, it says, I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who has brought you from under the burdens of the Egyptians. Once again, I will do this. I will take you. So he's saying, not only am I going to set you free from the yoke of slavery that you're in, I'm also going to make you my people. It would be like you buying somebody that was a slave and then saying, hey, by the way, if you want to just come and live with me as my son, not as a slave, but as my son, you can come in. You're always going to have food on the table. You're always going to have a bed here. That is what God is saying. He's like, listen to me. I'll set you free, and I'm going to take you as my own, not as a slave, but as a child of king. And it goes on in verse 8. I will bring you into the land that I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you for possession. I am the Lord. And this is a wonderful, beautiful statement. He starts out by saying, I am the Lord. He says it in the middle, I am the Lord. He ends it off with, I am the Lord. Everything is there to remind him that, hey, I am in control. Even though life doesn't look like the way that you want it to look like, I am God. I am in control. You can trust me. This is wonderful, good news. But see how the Egyptians responded in verse 9. Moses spoke thus to the people of Israel, but they did not listen to Moses, because they're broken spirit and harsh slavery. I don't know if you've ever been there as well. See, because back in Exodus chapter 4, just 2 chapters ago, Moses said almost the exact same thing, verbatim, that he heard from God. God is calling him out of Egypt into the promised land. He said almost the exact same thing, and their response in chapter 4 was that they bowed down their heads and they worshiped God. They said, finally, God has seen us. But simply 2 chapters later, now they say, we're not going to believe you. And it seems like whenever life is difficult, whenever life hits us and it doesn't seem fair, at those moments it's so hard to believe the promises of God, isn't it? But the good news is your next point in the bulletin, is that your circumstance doesn't change God's faithfulness. What you're going through right now doesn't change God's faithfulness. See, God was just as faithful to Israel in this moment as he was a few chapters earlier. He's just as faithful to you as he was when things were going well. The circumstances doesn't change God's faithfulness. The problem is what Israel was doing is the same thing that you and I do, which is that we look at today and then we judge all of God's eternal promises based on how we're feeling today. We say, this is hard, this is difficult, things aren't going the way that I want. How could a God say that he loves me forever whenever today is so hard? We judge eternity by what we're feeling as today. But we need to switch it around. We need to start to judge today by what we know of eternity. We can say God is always going to be loving. He is always going to be good. There isn't one moment where he doesn't have the best interest in my mind. And so, yeah, today is hard. But I'm going to look at today in light of eternity and know that God always has my best interest in mind. So don't judge today by today. Judge it by all eternity, because our circumstance doesn't change God's faithfulness. In verse 10 now. So the Lord said to Moses, go in and tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the people of Israel go out of this land. Verse 12. But Moses said to the Lord, behold, The people of Israel have not listened to me. How then shall Pharaoh listen to me? For I am of uncircumcised lips. And so God says, go back into Pharaoh. And he's like, I've already done this. I did this last week. God, why do I have to go back again? It turned out awful. Why would I go back? And furthermore, God, the people of Israel didn't even believe me. Why would Pharaoh believe me now? I'm a man of uncircumcised lips, which is a weird statement, by the way. It's like, me too. I don't think that's all of us, right? But obviously he's saying, listen, I can't speak well. You're asking me to do something. I'm not comfortable with it. It's not going to turn out well. Your people don't even believe it. Why would Pharaoh believe it? But in verse 13, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron and gave them a charge about the people of Israel, about Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the people out of Israel, out of the land of Egypt. So he says, go back and do it. And there are times, certainly we've all felt it, where you say, man, I don't want to obey anymore. Maybe you're married to somebody where you say, it's hard for me to keep loving them like you want me to love them. It's hard for me to submit. It's hard to me to show respect to this person when I feel like they're not doing their side of things, but God says, keep loving them, keep respecting them, keep submitting to them. There's going to be other times with our children and they're running away, they're acting sinful, and we say, God, I don't want to keep loving and keep putting out, keep getting hurt like this, but God says to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, and that's what God is saying here. But then he does something very odd. He does something that, honestly, for a couple days, I really started to struggle. Like, why in the world did he do this? Moses actually puts something in the next few verses that is like, honestly, it's just a weird thing for him to do. I couldn't understand why in the world he would do this. Because what he does in the next few verses is he actually sticks in a genealogy right in the middle, which is a list of his family tree, which is essentially, basically, like if you were going to a movie this afternoon and you're watching some action movie, and then halfway through the movie, all of a sudden, it just stops the movie and it's like, let's roll the credits in the middle of the movie. Right? So then you have to sit there for 20 minutes and watch a bunch of names scroll up, and you say, well, when can we get back to the movie? See, because he's building momentum. He's about ready to start the plagues. It's about ready to finally get to the crescendo. All the exciting stuff is about to happen. And then all of a sudden, Moses is like, let me tell you about my family tree real quick before we get into the exciting stuff. And we say, like, why in the world does he do this? Listen, this is not a fun thing for most of us. Whenever we hit the genealogy in our daily Bible reading, we're like, okay, this will be a quick day, right? It's like, so-and-so begot so-and-so, I got it all right? Like, why in the world did he do this? I think he had a purpose in doing it. I think even that if we pay close attention, we're going to see that God is trying to reveal himself in a special way, even in the genealogy. This isn't just preacher talk right now. I'm not just trying to get you to be excited about something. I'm saying, no, literally, whenever you read through this, and if you pay close enough attention, you're going to notice a few things, and God is even trying to tell a story, even in this genealogy here. So let's go through it. I can't say that I teach verse by verse and skip over verses, so we're in it together. Verse 14, it says, these are the heads of their fathers' houses, the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, Hanok, Palu, Hezron, Carmi, and there's probably people out in the lobbies like, is Pastor speaking in tongues right now? Pray for me. I've been nervous about this all week. These are the clans of Reuben. So he starts out, and it's Jacob's oldest son, who had 12 sons. Reuben was his oldest. Now, Reuben was a good man in some respects because he was the only one of the brothers that didn't actually want to kill Joseph. If you remember, Reuben was the only one that was like, I'm going to try to save him. And so that was his redeeming value. So it seems like he was good in that regards. But if you know the story of Reuben well, you know that his father Jacob had a few wives and have had a few concubines, a few girlfriends, right? Reuben ended up sleeping with one of his dad's girlfriends, which, by the way, is a bad thing to do, if you didn't notice, right? I wouldn't let that dude be a deacon in our church. I wouldn't esteem him and say, look at this shining example of Reuben. He didn't want to murder his brother, which is good, but he also sleeps around with his dad's girlfriends. That's kind of a weird person in your family tree. But we all got one of those guys, right? We all got that uncle that we try to avoid here. So maybe if we go on here, it goes on and says the sons of Simeon. Simeon was the second oldest. Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zophar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. These are the clans of Simeon. Now, if you're looking at this, you see that he put in an extra little sentence there, didn't he? That Shaul was a son of a Canaanite woman. And that's Simeon's son, which means that Simeon also ended up sleeping with a Canaanite woman, which is not allowed either for Jewish men. These were the people that they were supposed to avoid. These were the people that were supposed to be kicked out of the land of Canaan so that Israel could enter into the promised land. And yet Moses, in his family tree, was like, oh yeah, by the way, he also had a relationship with a Canaanite woman. I just thought you should know that. And we say, why would you include that? Like, for instance, some people will say, like, the Bible is full of errors, or people have come in and edited it. Like, if somebody edited the Bible, they did an awful job because they left in all the bad parts. They left in all the stuff that makes you say, why would you include this? Why would Moses want people to know these sorts of things? Verse 16, these are the names of the sons of Levi according to their generations. Gershon, Kohath, Merari, the years of the life of Levi being 137 years. It doesn't mention much about Levi, but if you know the story of Levi and Simeon in the Bible, they did some of the darkest things that you could imagine. See, Levi ends up, his family tree turns into the priest, right? You know that. They were the priestly tribe. They were the ones that connected the people of God back to God himself. But Levi, the man, he wasn't a good guy. See, because there's a story at the end of Genesis where it talks about Levi and Simeon's sister ended up getting raped. And they go to the man that assaulted their sister, and they say, listen, we have a deal for you. We know what you did to our sister. If you get circumcised, and all the people in your village, all the men in your village get circumcised, then we will allow our sister to marry you since you've already defiled her, and then we can be one people. If you all get circumcised, then that's what we're allowed to do. And so they thought that was a good financial decision, the man, and he was a man of power, so he had everybody inside this village all get circumcised, all the men, and just a couple days later when they were all wounded, when they couldn't fight, Simeon and Levi came in and slaughtered an entire village of men. Most of those guys had nothing to do with their sister. And I can understand the rage and the anger, of course, we all can. And of course, that man that did it should have been held accountable. But to go in and kill an entire village, not only would we not let those guys be deacons, like we'd be calling the police on, hey, there's those guys that killed an entire village worth of people. This is Moses' family tree. This is a messed up family. And I don't know if you're starting to sense this here, but there's kind of some themes that you're going to start to notice. Verse 17, the sons of Gershon, Libni, Shimei, by the clans, the sons of Kohath, Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzel. The years of the life of Kohath being 133 years. Verse 19, the sons of Merari, Mali, Mushni. These are the clans of the Levites according to their generations. For all those men, we don't know anything good or bad about them because they were all slaves. They were all insignificant. They were not important. History has largely forgotten them. Verse 20, Amram took his wife Jochebed, his father's sister, and she bore him Aaron and Moses, the years of the life of Amram being 137 years. We say, hey, there's Aaron and Moses. We finally get down to them, right? We know those names. But I want you to notice a couple things if you haven't already picked up on it. Amram was their dad, and he took a wife named Jochebed, who was his father's sister. Who's your father's sister? Your aunt, whatever part of the nation you're from. That's weird, right? Like that's incest. That's not even allowed in Mississippi. That's not allowed anywhere, right? Like that's a weird thing to do. I got things. I'm making fun of too many states. This is just a side note. I made fun of New York a few weeks ago because I was like, all these New Yorkers are moving to Hernando County, and I shook my fist at them. And then we had a first-time guest that came up to me, a sweet old lady. She's like, just wanted to let you know I moved in from New York last week. I was like, no. I haven't seen her again, so I need to stop making fun of states. But notice this, that Aaron and Moses were children of incest. Why would you include that? Why would you just call her your mom? Why would you include that little detail? This is Moses writing it about himself. Why would he include all these things in there? Why would he include these sorts of people in there? Verse 21, the sons of Izhar, Korah, Nepheg, and Zikri, the sons of Uzel, Mishni, Elipan, and Sushi. I messed that one up, yeah. It's hard. Sushi, yeah. No, that was Jewish. Aaron took as his wife Elisheba, the daughter of Amminadab, the sister of Nahshon. He gives an extra little detail there. I wonder why. And she bore him Nabad, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. Nabad and Abihu, his oldest two sons, by the way, ended up being burned alive in the temple of God because they were sinners. They were doing some things inside the temple that wasn't right. And so God literally burned the oldest two alive, and then he told Aaron, hey, Aaron, don't cry for your sons. They were sinners. This is part of their story. Verse 24, the sons of Korah, Azar, Elkanah, and whatever that last guy is. These are the clans of the Korahites. Korah right there. He led a revolt against Moses and Aaron, and ended up that he was standing on the ground, and God thought it was so bad that he just opened up the ground, swallowed him and his family whole, and shut it up. Like, so it's just Spring Hill, like sinkhole type thing. But like, these are the type of people that are in his family. Verse 25, Eleazar, Aaron's son, took as his wife's daughter Patel, and she bore him Phinehas. These are the heads of the fathers' houses of the Levites by their clans. These are, the last couple of verses here, these are the Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said, bring out the people of Israel from the land of Egypt by their hosts. It was they who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, about bringing out the people of Israel from Egypt. This Moses and this Aaron. And whenever I read that, I don't really get the sense that God is saying, behold, look at mighty Moses, look at mighty Aaron and their family tree. No, he's saying, it's this loser and this loser. It's these guys. These are the guys that's calling you out. These are the guys that's leading you out. And there's one clear message here. It's that it's going to be God. It's not going to be Moses and Aaron. Yeah, they had the right blood type. They were Levites there, and so it showed that they were of the priestly tribe, and that was good, and that was part of it. But even more than that, he always was showing, he was always pointing out the individuals who brought shame, because he wanted to show them, Moses, I am the Lord. I am the Lord. And you could look at your life, and maybe you look at your family life, and you say, God, how is God faithful when all of this stuff is going on? When all of these bad things, when I've been abused, when I have family members that are going through this sort of thing, how in the world is God faithful through all of that? Until we take a step back and we look at that whole story and see God was still moving that whole time. It's because of all that sinfulness. That is actually what shows the faithfulness of God. It's not that people are sinners. It's that God is faithful even through it. And that's the last point, is disruptions don't diminish God's faithfulness. They highlight it. They highlight it. Because only God could take a family that messed up and say, you know what? I'm going to use them. I'm going to use them in a mighty, mighty way here. And so I made mention to one extra verse here. Verse 23. I want to jump back real quick here, because he adds an extra little detail in there, if you notice. It talked about Aaron's wife, Elisheba, and the daughter of Amminadab and the sister of Nahshon. And it's just an interesting little extra tidbit that she was a sister of Nahshon. And we say, why in the world did he put that in? Like, what details is that? Is that a famous man? Is that an important man? Like, does it make him look good? Does it make it look bad? Like, why in the world? And honestly, I'm not entirely sure if if Moses would have even known why the Spirit prompted him to include the brother there. I'm not, but thankfully we have more than one genealogy in the Bible. And we can start to fill in some of the gaps here. And there's another genealogy. When I started to read it, I started to be reminded that God is faithful, even in the hardest moments. See, because there's a story of Ruth a few books later in the Bible. And at the very end of Ruth, and it's a wonderful story that we don't have time to get into, but at the very end of Ruth, it gives her genealogy as well. And in verse 20 of Ruth chapter 4, it says Amminadab, you recognize that name, fathered Nahshon, you recognize that name. Nahshon fathered Salmon, Salmon fathered Boaz, Boaz fathered Obed, Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered David, King David. And it's almost like in Leviticus chapter 6, when all of this craziness was going on, when all of it didn't make sense, whenever you say God doesn't have a plan, I can't believe it, God just sneaks in this little line here and says, oh, by the way, I still have a plan. Not only to lead you into Israel, but also to set up King David, who's going to be the good and righteous king. And hey, if you are just into genealogies and you are into this sort of thing, go back home this afternoon and start to read Matthew chapter 1 in that genealogy, because you're going to find that David had a great-great-great-great-grandson, and David's great-great-great-grandson was none other than King Jesus. Do you get this? Do you understand it? Do you grasp it? What's happening in this genealogy? He just adds in this little extra line just to remind us not only were they going to get inside of the nation, not only was there going to be a good and righteous King David, but there's one day going to be a king named Jesus. And even in this disruption, even in this genealogy, Jesus is shining forth right now. And in your life as well. In your life as well. I don't know what's going on. I don't know the hardships that you face. But what if all of these hardships, you can just take a step back and say, God's been faithful every single time. He's been faithful every single time. And as we close down here, the question is not whether or not God is faithful to you, because the answer is always yes and amen and yes and amen. The question that I want you to ask is, are you faithful to him? Are you going to be faithful to him? I mentioned our brother Jerry at the start of the sermon. If you don't know, we often have Anita take pictures for us so we can post them on Facebook later on in the week. And 3 weeks ago, on Jerry's last Sunday here at our church, she took this photo. And I don't know if this is his last photo, but it probably is, and it's a good one to go out on, isn't it? That on his last Sunday at church, a few weeks before he died, he did not know this was going to be his last Sunday, sitting right back there. He did not know it was going to be his last, but he was still praising the Lord like he always does. And whenever I was talking to Carol just yesterday, she said on his final day, he was trying to hum a song. We couldn't understand it because he had a mask on, but he was trying to hum a song and say, praise Jesus and hallelujah. The question is not whether God is going to be faithful to us, is are you going to be faithful to him? On your last day, if your last picture, what's your last picture going to show? Is it going to show that you were faithful even to the dying breath, even in the hospital bed? I was faithful to him. Why? Because he still is faithful to Jerry even in the hospital. He's still faithful to you. And he's still faithful to me. With every head bowed and every eye closed. I want to remind you today that God is faithful, that you can trust in him. Whether it's a good day or a bad day, that does not change his faithfulness to you, but it gives you even greater opportunity to trust in him. Father, I thank you for the way that Jerry lived his life and as an example to me, an example to this church, Lord. And the examples that you gave us in your word, none of them were perfect except for the man named Jesus. We are all messed up. We're all sinful. We all have heartaches. We all carry burdens and scars. But yet you're faithful even in the midst of all of it. So Lord, I pray that you would find us faithful. That we would all one day hear, well done, good and faithful servant. And it's all because of you loving us first. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.